to another episode of the Truth and Data podcast, where each week we tackle a different digital forensics topic. I'm Jessica,
I'm Debbie.
and today we're going to be talking about the different roles that exist inside digital forensics. When we're talking about this, I'm not just talking for people who are looking to break in, but we're also talking to people who've been working in the field and may be ready for a transition. That might be retirement time from one role, or they might be burnt out either from doing incident response on a 24-hour and shift work, or from working in law enforcement and dealing with noxious content to a variety of reasons. So, we're going to break down the different job opportunities in digital forensics and incident response, the different worlds in which you can work, and kind of give that broader sense, because some people don't realize how many different types of work you can do in this field.
There really are so many different avenues that you can take. Whether it's law enforcement and sworn or non-sworn. And I know we're going to get into all of the details, so I won't do that right now. But there really are a lot of avenues, and I like how you said the fact that people may be transitioning out. It's not just about getting into digital forensics, although we can talk about that,
And we'll
but
do a
it's
separate episode
transitioning.
all about that.
Yes, and it's all the different places, all the different entities, all the different opportunities that there are, because I don't think a lot of people truly understand all the places, all the different opportunities, all the different missions that you can
Right.
have related to digital forensics.
Right, because it's not just crime like we think of murders and child abuse and
Right,
everything else. It's things, any company that has a network is susceptible to cybercrime, as is any individual. So you're talking everything from federal to state and local agencies, not
right,
just in law enforcement, to academia, to school systems, to any company that exists.
right,
Everywhere has a digital footprint, and hence everywhere needs people who specialize in digital forensics and incident response.
right. Absolutely.
So let's start with, just so people know a little bit about our backgrounds, because between the two of us, we've worked a lot, maybe not every single type of role, but we've worked in a lot of these arenas. Um, so Debbie, you've spent.
Yeah, so I most of my background is in law enforcement, and and really I was hiring digital forensic examiners. So that provides me with sort of some insight into sort of what our roles were. I also worked for technology and tool providers, which is another arena for you to potentially seek employment.
Yeah.
Um, and I know that you have done military DoD. What?
Military, DoD as a contractor, intelligence community as a contractor. I did work in the private sector. I worked at Ernst& Young doing forensics. I've also worked as a vendor, and do now, I guess, uh, as a trainer,
Training provider, yes.
training provider, forensic service provider, but also academia as an instructor and as a researcher.
Research,
So,
yeah.
I think between the two of us, the vendors, the academia, I'd say the area that we're lacking is neither one of us have been an in-house corporate examiner,
Right,
but we'll make sure we talk about that. E-discovery, academia, military, DoD, the intelligence community, criminal defense and private forensic
yeah.
work, law enforcement. All of these are options, and so we're going to kind of just try to give you a little bit of flavor about what each one's about, so you can find the right thing for your next career move. Because again, a lot of people transition between these different roles. As I mentioned, I've worked in several of these throughout my career, and some may be right just for different lifetime ventures, also burnout, also you may be retiring, especially out of law enforcement, which tends to have a younger
Right,
retirement age, or the military, which also has a younger retirement threshold. So you might be ready for your second career, or you might have a lifestyle change. I mean, you could be doing incident response, working in the big four when you're young. But then if you have kids, I know for me, actually, one of the reasons that I left that world was just because of the hours and the travel. Um, and so we'll talk about the plus and minus to all of
right.
these. What I'm meaning with, I do a lot of mentorship, people who are career transitioners, but also people who are young and breaking into the field. And when I mean career transitioners, I mean people coming from other fields, healthcare, teaching, whatever, into digital forensics. One of the first things I ask is I'm trying to figure out where they're looking at going because it affects what kind of research and what kind of networking, et cetera, they should be doing. And I'll always ask, are you comfortable with noxious content, meaning child sexual abuse material? And, I in my time have seen more live death videos than
Right.
I'd like to count. Um, are you comfortable with noxious content? Are you comfortable with austere environments? Are you comfortable with deployments? Are you comfortable working long hours? Are you comfortable with
Travel.
travel? Absolutely. Are you okay with shift work, which can happen in the SOC? Or the Security Operations Center? Are you comfortable with going into homes that may not be in pristine condition? I think that
Right.
was a very large euphemism. Going on scene. And all of those questions matter. Are you comfortable with how your work might be used and perceived? Are you comfortable with
Right.
doing defense work? So there are people who are going to have different comfortable. Are you okay with doing, fraud and financial work? Some people really just don't like that kind of work. Is what's most important to you? Is it
Right.
mission? Is it solving crimes? Is it getting hackers? Like figuring out where they came from? Like
Sure. The
what? And
puzzle.
by the way,
Yeah.
hackers are good and bad. I just mean
Right.
fine. I, so let's start with law enforcement. What are kind
Okay.
of the different roles that exist in law enforcement?
Gosh, we could probably do just an entire podcast just on each of these. But
We
so law
could.
enforcement, across the country, examiners are both sworn and non-sworn. So, different agencies, and honestly, globally, their law enforcement examiners are either going to be sworn or unsworn, and different agencies handle that differently. I know for the agency that I worked for, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, our examiners were non-sworn. We did have agents that would get some digital forensic training, but it wasn't to the level of our examiners. And we also, so our examiners, though, would go out on scene with us. The agents would always, do the tactical things, but the digital forensic examiners would come in the house and, they would triage on scene and things like
Yep.
that. And they loved their job because they really loved the mission. They weren't necessarily paid probably to the level that maybe they should have been, or their knowledge and experience, dictated, but they loved the mission. And there are a variety of agencies that have examiners. So, there's local, state, and federal
Mm-hmm.
agencies that all have examiners. I know in our office, we also allowed our examiners to specialize, and that helped us. So, a new examiner coming in, obviously they would go through basic, some basic training that we required. They would go through tool specific training. And then as they progressed, we allowed them to specialize. So if they were interested more in iOS devices, that's what we would let them specialize in. Video forensics, we would let them specialize in that. And it worked out for us because we had a variety of interests, a variety of expertise, and so those types of opportunities are available. Uh,
And for
the
clarity, though, this is a state level agency, so
A
you have
state
a
level agency.
larger number of
That's what.
personnel than
Yes,
maybe
and
my local
correct,
county PD has only two
correct.
examiners, so they can't specialize. They have to be
No,
able to do
absolutely. They have
everything.
to be able to do everything. And what I was getting ready to go into was exactly that local or smaller agencies or local agencies, it might be one person
For
who
sure.
is the investigator, the examiner, and the intelligence analyst. Like they are literally doing it all. And, some people like that. Some people will feel overwhelmed by that. But there are a wide variety of situations, I guess, circumstances, in the digital forensics realm in law enforcement.
And if people are interested in that difference between those different roles, we did do a previous episode where we really dug into that. It's episode 3, Frontline Digital Forensics. and we talked about how on collection really affects um, the back of the house and the difference between those roles. So if anyone's interested in kind of understanding that difference, we talked about that
Right.
there.
Right. So, just in law enforcement alone, there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of different, I guess, skill levels that you can acquire, depending on your desire, and the agency that you work for.
And I think something great about that law enforcement realm is the amount of training that's available. And
Hmm.
I like that your civilian examiners get that. I've worked as a contractor, and contractors are a little different because when somebody is brought on as a contractor, it is expected that they have all of the skills and knowledge for a position.
Right.
So in the contracting world, training and allocation in time for hours for training is, in my experience, much less. And I've been a contractor at multiple locations, and Hexordia has contracts in multiple locations. So even when I was a contractor at TDAC, Terrorist Explosive Device Analytical Center, which supported federal law enforcement, um, because we were contractors, we didn't get access to training. We did get some training, but
Right.
we wouldn't get the same kinds of training
Right.
opportunities where you could come in without knowledge and they would send you through a base course. You actually had to come in with the skills to do the job. So
Right.
just a note there that they're occasionally, contractors are less common in law enforcement, more common
True.
to have civilian and sworn, but I have had that
So since
experience.
you're already talking about it, what is your experience in, say, military, DoD, intelligence, that sort of
Sure.
thing?
Okay. So military and DoD, you actually have a couple of different elements that can exist. And I'll kind of speak about military, Department of Defense, along with the intelligence community together. I'm not really going to differentiate between them. So there's a couple of different types of things that can happen in these organizations that can use DFIR skills. So you can have your traditional law enforcement agencies
Right.
that exist within the DoD. So think your military police, but really your agencies involved in this are going to be like in Army, it's CID, the Criminal Investigations Division, or you have the
NCIS.
at NCIS, the Naval Criminal
Naval.
Investigative
Yep.
Service, which supports the Marine Corps and the Navy. You've got the Air Force, AFOSI, or Air Force Office of Special Investigations. You've got DCC, or the Defense Cyber Crime Center, which actually does cyber crime across all three. So that's more of like your criminal activity portions. But then you have the counterterrorism and intelligence portions. So the LEDOD, AFSI, those are going to be very similar to what you described. And again, they can have a mix of military personnel who are active duty, civilian DoD or the intelligence community personnel. So civilians who work for those agencies who are not military members, which I guess is kind of similar to your sworn civilian
Right.
scenario. But then you can also have contractors who are this third bucket. They work for private companies and they're fulfilling a mission and the government is their customer. And this is actually what Hexordia does professionally, one of our many avenues that we do. Um, and so the other area you can have in addition to that is counterterrorism and intelligence. And in counterterrorism and intelligence, you may have roles that are at the back of the lab, but you may also have deploying roles where you're actually deploying forward
Right.
with active units. And yes, contractors and civilians and military members all can be in deployable roles. Don't think that it's just military members, depending on the agency and the structure of the contract. Or you could be in the lab, or sometimes you rotate. So sometimes you'll be on a rotational role where you rotate between those. I would say that, just for the record, counterterrorism and intelligence also has a lot of noxious content exposure,
Right.
as someone who did that work. And then and typically in the DoD and intelligence, you are expected to be able to maintain a clearance, right? The
Right.
third element that you have then is um, IG, or Inspector General, and this exists in every government agency.
Right.
That is your internal investigations for that agency. When I say every agency, I mean everything from the Postal Service to the Department of Defense, right? Everybody has this IG, this Inspector General. And so that's the group that does investigations internally. And that could be anything from HR investigations to fraud to misuse and
Right.
abuse, et cetera. And then the fourth category is protecting those critical networks. So the incident response and cybersecurity elements that are also doing digital forensics. So really anything that can exist in the outside world, right, in all of the areas that we're talking about, actually can exist in the military, DoD, intelligence community sector because they have almost their own entire universe, right? In terms of what they have.
So is the military, in terms of training, I know you said as a contractor,
As a
you are
contractor, no,
expected to already have training, but in the military, they train you as well?
military does fantastic training.
Yeah.
So if you're going into the military as an active duty service member, and for the record, I was in the Marine Corps. I was not in cybersecurity in the Marine Corps. I was actually an avionics man on a Harrier. But fun fact. My military career enabled me to be able to go into some of the other stuff I do. Um, but the 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 military does a lot of extensive training. They don't expect you to come into with the skills. The civilian side can be a mix. So the civilian side, they're expecting you to come in at like a mid-level with some experience, but they do. I mean, I've had government civilian interns work in my lab, so and then they will though grow your career, right? So you will go to training there, but depending on what level you're being hired in, you may or may not already need to have experience. And again, that would be across all four of those realms. Um,
Right.
so I guess that kind of covers that. Uh,
Mhm.
we can go now into some of the other areas.
Yeah.
Um,
So either corporate or tool providers.
so
Um,
yeah, let's talk about corporate. Let's talk about tool
okay.
providers last because I think that's
Okay.
kind of like a good uh,
It,
place to end.
wrap up.
Wrap up. So, in terms of doing work in corporations, there's two routes. So,
Okay.
you could be working for an external provider. So, for example, I worked at EY or Ernst& Young, one of the big four accounting firms in their FTDS, Forensics Technology and Discovery Services. And in those, you could be doing forensics or incident response because some companies, like let's say you're a Forbes top 10 or Forbes top 50, you probably have an internal team that does your forensics and your incident response. So then you would be internal. And an internal team, sometimes there's more than one because you could be doing incident response, you could be doing internal investigations, like we said with the IG,
Right.
or you could be doing e-discovery, which is its own subfield that's around legal holds, but uses a lot of email holds and legal holds, but uses a lot of similar tools to digital forensics. So we'll
You're
consider that
searching.
in here,
Just
searching,
you're
yeah,
searching.
and
You're
we'll
just searching for something different.
and we'll consider that part of this whole realm because it,
Sure.
it is a lot of people transition as they're moving through with their careers. So in corporate, you've really got those three things: the internal investigations, things that you're doing to support general counsel, incident response, trying to respond to intrusions on the network, and e-discovery. But you can also do that for what's called an FSP or a forensic service provider. Um, so that could be this external party that's doing corporate. So think more like a digital mountain or an
Mhm.
EY is going to be doing that as opposed to any top 10 like a Walmart or a Target or a
Right.
CVS who has their own internal teams. I don't know if CVS has their own internal team. Um, you got your and another like example of a forensic service provider might be an Aon. Now those forensic service providers, they are extremely skilled. That is a great place to skill up because they're constantly dealing with everybody's worst day. If you're internal corporate, hopefully you're not getting an incident every day and you only know your network and your
Right.
organization. Forensic service providers have to know all organizations. But it means, like, let's say you're with a CrowdStrike or something else, you may be working shift work to be able to provide 24 by 7 support to your customers. But I would say if you can get a job in that straight out of school, I think you have the highest learning curve. Like you're going to learn the
Interesting.
most the
Okay.
quickest, but you're going to have shift work. I think it's a high rate of burnout personally, and you'll have shift work to start. You may start in a sock, and you're going to do a lot of travel potentially. I mean, when I was in that, I was traveling all the time. So it might not be right for people who have young children or an elderly parent they're taking care of, or your family
Right.
situation might deem that not the right place for you. Or it might be totally cool, depending on your support network, your community, etc. Um, so that's kind of that corporate. I do want to mention that there is also the possibility to work in how places that just do e-discovery. So there are companies that really focus on e-discovery, outside of it just being an
So
internal team that's providing that outsourcing
outsourcing. Yeah.
e-discovery, right? And that might be a little less intense than incident response, but still in that corporate
Right.
realm. And again, in these corporate jobs, you're less likely to have exposure to noxious content. But again, you may have large hour requirements.
So I
But
know
again,
in a
depending
lot
on
of
the
those
environment.
corporate entities, they expect you to already be trained,
They
correct?
do, they do. They expect you to already be trained, but I'd say a lot of the corporates still invest in continuing education, kind of like what I was saying with the civilian
I
military. And again,
right.
but for the record, there are a million exceptions to everything saying. We are
Of course.
being
We're
very
generalities
generalized here.
here.
I don't like to speak in generalities as a forensics examiner. So your mileage may vary, your organization may be different. So please don't. I mean, you feel free to hate us in the comments. It really doesn't bother me. But my point is we're not. You may have an organization that's very different. I have met some great corporate organizations that give a lot of training, and I think that's great.
I
Um,
have
they do expect some level coming in, but they also do
right.
hire junior roles.
Sure. I have many, many friends. Being here in Atlanta and having, coordinated the ICAC task force, I have a lot of friends who either worked for me directly as an examiner at the GBI or worked as an examiner in other agencies in Metro Atlanta that now work for Truist and Home Depot and Cox Communications and Coca-Cola.
You got it.
So they are
Place
their
headquartered.
internal.
Hmm.
Yes, all there are a lot in Delta. There are a lot of major corporations that are headquartered here in Atlanta, just like every other major
Just like
city.
every other
But
major
there
city,
are
yeah.
many, many law enforcement examiners who have then transitioned to corporate roles, and the training that they receive does help them do that.
And just to be clear, we are going to do an entire episode on transitioning. So, just to be clear, we're going to do an episode on breaking into digital forensics. We're going to do an episode on
Transitioning
transitioning from law enforcement to
or
corporate
military,
or
yeah,
IR or military.
yeah,
I would say it'd be transitioning from military and law enforcement
government, yeah.
to government to corporate IR. Is what we'll do a whole episode on that. So, another place that you can go that I don't want to gloss over in the private sector is there are digital forensics firms, and there's a lot of law enforcement people who do this after their career instead of going corporate, who begin working defense cases, criminal defense
Right.
cases, civil defense cases. So doing private forensics. Some people hang their own shingle. Some people go work for a company like Metadata Forensics or Garrett Discovery. I'm just trying to give examples of companies if people
Right.
want to look up for each one of these things I'm saying. So that is another option, but there's more. You can also go into academia. And by the way, I think academia is a good bridge. You can teach adjunct part time for a lot of places, and you can also do research. So, academia is great. If you're interested in academia, please check out DFRWS. I think that's a great place to meet professors. DFRWS US is coming up in July of 2025. As I record this, I'm thinking this episode will come out before that in Chicago. But academia is a great place. I love being an adjunct professor. I've been doing it for 9 years. And I highly recommend it because you learn so much from your students.
So I have a loaded question for you.
Yeah.
So your background is varied. It's incredibly varied. But do you feel those who are in academia also need to vary their experience as they teach. I know that they're teaching processes and like very technical things, but do you feel like they need experience in other areas?
This is a very loaded question. I'm going to say that
Maybe we'll have another podcast
no, no,
about it.
I'm gonna give a piece of advice that is what I give to young people who are looking at what school to go to, or even professionals who are looking for where to go for their masters. There is a difference between if you want to be a practitioner or a researcher. If you want to go for your PhD, be a researcher or be a developer. That's different than being a practitioner who's looking at cases. And when you're looking at institutions to decide where to go, look at who the professors
Right,
are and pick professors who align with your goal there, and
right.
institutions that align with your goals as to if they're more focused on a practical training program for people who are looking to be practitioners, or if they're more focused on a research program that's
That makes
looking to
sense.
break ground in digital forensics. We need both. We need engineers, we need technicians, and we need practitioners, and we need scientists.
They need to
Um,
work together too.
and we do need to work together. And again, that's what's great about DFRWS, because it's kind of that intersection where
Hmm.
practitioners can derive things from academia, and academia can learn what problems practitioners really need solved. But we need pure science, we need engineering, and I'm kind of stealing this concept from Eugene Spafford, who's at Purdue, who gave a great talk at DFRWS in maybe 2018 around the science, the engineers, and the technicians, and needing all three. And I'm going to stress that, and that different institutions are going to give you different degrees of that.
Okay, I didn't mean to go off on a
No,
tangent,
that's
but
okay,
it
but it was a
popped in my
fair
head, and I was
question.
like, I really want to ask her
That's
this.
what's great about the show, right? Is we're able to have these conversations.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
I would say the other areas, the area, and probably the last area we need to cover, and if we missed one, I'm sure you'll all let us know.
Please let us know.
Please let us know. Is really working at vendors, and that could be in so many roles, right? You could be an
It really
instructor
could.
trainer. You could
Yes,
be a developer, you could be a researcher, you could be a solution consultant who's helping other people who have been in the field do what you do. You could actually be a dev, doing development of tools. Um, you could be a community engagement person like Debbie
right.
does, who really interacts and ensures that the vendors understand the needs of the community, and that the
One of my
community
favorite things to
understands
do.
the capabilities. Well, that's why we love you. We
Yes,
love you for many reasons, but we love having you in that capacity here. What are your thoughts on working for a vendor? As somebody, you've worked for
I have.
multiple
I've worked for
vendors.
several vendors. I actually loved it. So, coming from law enforcement, it gave me the opportunity to still be a part of the mission. So, like you said, they're developing tools. Some of my role was ensuring that the tool provider was actually listening to their customers, taking what the customers' challenges were, what they needed developed, what they didn't like about a particular feature, and explaining that to the vendor and being a liaison, a translator. And I think that's those types of things are very important. But it
And
gave
it's
me the
critical.
opportunity to still feel like I was helping law enforcement by helping provide them with the resources that they need to do their challenging jobs.
I love that, because when I was at Magnet, I'll tell you something. I loved being at Magnet, and something I really felt while I was there was when I was working in the DoD and IC as a contractor, I worked my cases and I was able to help one case at a time. But when I went
Right,
and worked at Magnet, my work was impacting thousands of cases at a time when I
right,
worked on something. So I really liked the multiplication of impact. And I really think that it's a really good place to go um, after having, obviously, a vendor is not a place you go at the beginning of your career.
right.
Maybe it is, but I think it is a really good place for someone to go as they're more seasoned in their career and they're looking for a next step. It's definitely, and the whole point is you can move around this industry and do these different roles. And
It's a
I
good
know
point.
people who have gone in every direction between every single one of these, and they pop out in my head, right? So like I think of like a Josh Brunty who went from being a police officer to being an academic researcher with a PhD. Dr. Josh Brunty, who's running everything over at Marshall University, right? That's a good example of someone who went from being at law enforcement to being a PhD
And
professor,
that
right?
probably
And people
wasn't his
might not think
plan.
about that. No, not from the
It
get-go, right? Well, I'm
evolved,
not to speak on your
right?
behalf, Josh,
Yeah.
but just one of many examples. And I mean, I know a lot of us, as you interact with vendors, you'll see a lot of people who came out of law enforcement and went to vendors, or even out of corporate and went to vendors. But you'll also see people who have gone from law enforcement to incident response. I've known people who have gone incident
Right.
response to law enforcement. I know
Yes.
people who have gone every single direction, and there is no right or wrong pathway.
No.
Just make sure your resume talks to the right side and that you're skilling up for the next job, because the next job probably does involve some skills you don't have. And if you're switching sides of the house, and that you find and educate yourself on those things and make sure you set your resume up for it. But again, we'll talk more about that in the breaking into episodes and transitioning episodes. Any other thoughts? Did we cover them all? Did we cover all the
No,
different
I think
places
we
you can
did.
go?
As the field evolves, there's even more opportunities that will become available. So I think that's maybe something to keep in mind also as a closing thought.
And I do want to stress the value of research, of pure digital forensics researchers. We're lucky here at Hexordia. We actually have a couple of people who work on our research team, researching forensic artifacts, researching vulnerabilities and exploits. And, we're really lucky to have those kinds of pure research contract opportunities and pure research time that we're able to give. So don't slack on that. Those may not be as plentiful, but talk about really cool work that
Critically
you can do
important,
in the
though.
field that is important. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us today for another episode of Truth and Data Podcast, and we'll catch you next time. Bye all.
Bye.